You're listening to the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. My name is Bill McIntyre, and it's time for this week's Long Island News, the show that talks to newsmakers and other important people from Nassau and Suffolk County that matter to Long Island and Long Islanders like you. So each week we'll have a conversation about issues that affect all of us. I live on Long Island just like you, and I want to know more about the people making the big decisions that affect all of us. Well, this week we're going to talk to a familiar name to most Long Islanders who decided to turn the page from a career in politics to find a place where there's no screaming, lobbying, or finger pointing, unless it's the tip of your finger against a line in a book you love. I'd love to welcome to the show former Congressman Steve Israel, who is now the proud owner of Theodore's books in Oyster Bay. Mr. Israel, welcome to this week's Long Island News.
It is great to be with you. Of all the kind things you just said, the most important, which was unsaid, is that I am an alum of Nassau Community College.
Yes, I do have that in my notes. Yeah. I know Nassau Community College is the best kept secret on Long Island, I think.
It is, and I often said when I was in Congress for 16 years that I never would have been in the United States Congress had I not gone to Nassau Community College. It gave me the tools I needed at an important time in my life. I still remember my political science professor, Professor Gerson, who kind of inspired me to think about Washington. I remember the extracurricular activities. And so it gave me everything I needed. It was just such an investment. And I think community colleges around the country are undervalued. Mm-hmm. They are critical platforms for so many students in America. We need to be doing more for them and with them.
Yeah, I agree. I've had friends over the years who... And I remember when they came here and they dispersed across the country and went to four-year schools after that. Not one of them had a credit turned down from Nassau Community College.
That's right.
And
I had some experience.
Yeah, that's saying quite a bit. I was lucky. I went back late. I wasn't a kid when I came back to school, and I had a great time.
Yeah,
I had a great time. I learned as much in the hallways speaking to professors from class to class as I did in classes.
That's exactly right.
It was terrific. All right. So anyway, briefly, for those that don't recall or even know, tell us about your time in politics and as a congressman for 16 years.
Yeah. So I graduated Nassau Community College, went to George Washington University, got my degree in political science, and I always dreamed, even growing up in Levittown and Wantagh, Long Island, my dream was to one day be a member of the Congress. I started thinking about that all the way back in fourth grade, the Gardner's Avenue Elementary School in Levittown. And so when I left Nassau Community, went to GW, still had that dream, worked on Capitol Hill as a staffer, and then decided the only way I'd ever be able to run for Congress representing Long Island was to get out of Washington and move back to Long Island. And so I did. And I worked a variety of jobs and got elected to the Huntington Town Board in 1993, and then had the opportunity to run for Congress in 2000. Did it. Not only did I not think I would win, but I don't know anybody who would think that I would win. And I did somehow. And so dour were my own prospects for reelection because it was a very Republican district and I was a Democrat, still am. But I was so dour about my prospects for reelection and so cheap a human being that I refused to buy a dresser for my clothing in Washington because I figured I'm not getting reelected. I'm not coming back here in 2 years. Why would I want to spend like $600 on a piece of furniture that I would just have to haul to the curb? But I did get reelected and continued to get reelected. I served 16 years and then finally left in rare form, unindicted and undefeated, which is a strong for a member of Congress these days.
It's a novel thing today. Yeah. Wow. Well, and it's quite a career change. What made you, what was the idea to open the bookstore here on Long Island? Was that always a part of the plan or?
Yes. And so around 2014, I began sensing that the anger in the American electorate building and the tribalization on both sides of the aisle, the extremism, the fact that members of Congress were just becoming, there were fewer and fewer members of Congress to cooperate with. Everybody was just going into their corners and spewing and screaming and shrieking. And I didn't get elected to Congress to be part of that. And so I decided I didn't want to get trapped in that bubble. It was time for me to leave after 16 years. And so I came back to Long Island to pursue new curiosities. Throughout my life, I've been a voracious reader, and my favorite places in the world are bookstores. When I was in Congress, Bill, my schedulers would always put on my schedule, no matter where I was in the country or in the world, the location of the closest bookstore. I've been to Afghanistan and Iraq nearly 20 times. You haven't shopped at a bookstore until you've shopped at a bookstall in Kabul, where you can hear mortar explosions in the distance. And when I left, I decided I just needed to purge myself of the venom and the sound bites and all of that Washington anger. And what better way of doing that than to open my own bookstore where there are no sound bites. And, sometimes it takes 300 pages of reading to truly understand something, and not a soundbite on Fox or MSNBC.
Right.
And I love it. So we opened 3 years ago. It is a struggle. It is a real struggle. Retail is tough, but retail independent bookstores face even higher and stiffer odds.
Yeah.
But I love it every day.
That's great. And I know. So when you got into business, what would you say the biggest hurdles were as far as was it our local government?
No, actually. So we're located in Oyster Bay, and Oyster Bay is kind of the center of energy and activity for Theodore Roosevelt, which is why we named the book Theodore's. And the town of Oyster Bay was helpful. We had the same hurdles that anybody else does in filing permits and trying to get certificates. And, we faced the same kinds of challenges that everybody does. But I wouldn't say that the town was, they were very friendly. Let's put it that way. But I did learn some lessons. The first lesson I learned the first tough lesson was you got to be willing to do everything. And so, I used to fly on Air Force One and sit in the Oval Office. Now I know it's kind of sounds trivial, but literally I was cleaning the toilet.
Sweep the floor. Yeah, sweep the floor, lock the door.
Right. Stocking books and sweeping up and doing all that. And number two, you're only as good as your team is. And so hiring the best team, it's hard because you're selling books, which means you can't just hire anybody. You have to hire people who love literature. You have to hire people who, when a customer walks in and says, I'm in the mood for a 19th century French romance, they know exactly where to bring you. And so hiring was a challenge. And then, struggling to meet payroll. When you're in a Congress and you run out of money, you just extend the debt and print more money. When you're a bookstore and you have a payroll to meet or a rent check, you can't print money. You got to figure out what gets cut and what gets sacrificed in order to pay your bills.
You can't rob Peter to pay Paul when Peter's not there. That's pretty wild. And you told us who Theodore was, but that's interesting. Theodore Roosevelt. So you named it Theodore. Yeah.
He was always my political hero. And, he not only was he governor and president and colonel, but I think that one of the things he was most proud of was his writing and his reading. Voracious reader and prolific writer. And so when you go to Sagamore Hill, I'm told, where he lived and died, I'm told that there are 7,000 books on the shelves in different rooms in Sagamore Hill that he read, some of them that he wrote. And I just think he always inspired me. Listen to this. I'm a Democrat talking about my favorite Republican president. But he was like the most defiant moderate I've seen in history. He wasn't interested. I mean, he was progressive, truly progressive on some issues. He was conservative on others. And that's the kind of leadership I think we need. Somebody who's defiantly moderate and knows how to bring people together instead of splitting them apart.
It's a new day. That's for sure. All right. Well, I have a list of some things about here. So you left Congress 7 short years ago, it says. You wrote in a guest essay in Newsday that you did say undefeated. You left undefeated and unindicted. I don't know. I look at politics today, and we were having a talk the other day about the Constitution, and it occurred to me that the gentleman that wrote the Constitution may have been a little naive in thinking what kind of people would be the ones to institute it or to, what could I say, husband, take care of it. And it seems that that seems to be the problem today with the Constitution. It's not the document.
I think, look, I never pretended to be the smartest member of Congress, although frankly the competition wasn't all that stiff. But I know my history. I prided myself on being one of the most studious or one of the deepest students of history. Read and would walk through the Capitol at the dead of night, just soaking in the history. And I think our founders, first of all, I don't know that they were naive. I think that they were actually constructively pessimistic. They knew human flaws and frailties and designed a constitution that would be able to anticipate those flaws. So before we elected our first president, the Constitution was written to impeach one. How about that? Before we passed our first law, the Constitution was written to require that it's got to get passed in the House and also the Senate and get signed by the president. And if the president vetoed, it could be overridden. And then the whole thing could go to the Supreme Court for final disposition. Right. So I think they actually were quite pessimistic in their view of humankind, but optimistic that they could create a system that would provide the institutions of democracy. I now worry deeply about our political state and status. Everybody reveres the Constitution except when it becomes inconvenient. Yeah. Right. And so, for example, forgive me if I sound too partisan, but the Constitution gives us a system to elect presidents. You would think we would all agree on that process, except that we have people in America who say, even though the president was elected, it was rigged, it was fake. We're going to throw out the system and make these wild claims that no court in America, Republican or Democratic judge, has upheld. So I think the Constitution is really under assault. We all revere it, but we turn on it when it doesn't necessarily fulfill our own view of ideology. And I'm concerned that it's going to be challenged. It's one of the reasons that I opened up a bookstore, because instead of pointing fingers to, and blaming other people for the erosion of democracy, right, I believe that reading books and understanding history and literature, that will strengthen democracy.
Yeah. It's a whole nother atmosphere. I mean, looking at things happening, they've undermined almost every democratic institution we have. And to me, that's purposeful. Yeah. So now, when you say, the court system stinks, or democracy, the FBI is terrible, Department of Justice is no good. If you have agents in there that can make that true, well, then people are going to agree with you. Yeah. And it seems it's a shame. People have said, we got to get rid of Donald Trump. And I think that even if we get rid of Donald Trump, we have what I call bad yeast in the bread. Yeah. Right? So we have a bad loaf of bread. You can't extract just the bad yeast in that instance. But we need to do that as a country. The propaganda is incredible. People, and again, it goes back to what you say, people who haven't read books are not aware of these kind of, I guess, tools that people use to get their way in politics. It is scary. What's the experiment to democracy? It's 270-something years, Rome lasted 5 times as long and still fell. I wonder how long we have. The things we all accepted before, like you hold the door for the guy behind you. When someone says good morning, you respond and say good morning. All of those normal things that most people in society accepted, they don't seem to exist anymore.
Well, here's what gives me hope. And I don't want to sound too flippant or mawkish, but this is what gives me hope. I teach at Cornell University. And the reason that I teach at Cornell University, frankly, is because when I am in the classroom interacting with students, I am eternally optimistic. My students at Cornell, and I would imagine at Nassau Community College, A, they have an intolerance for intolerance. B, they're critical thinkers. You can't just say it's night when it's day or day when it's night. They will challenge you. If you have an opinion, they want to know what backs up your opinion. Right. And they are not interested in cheap political stunts. They want to know what can be done to, as you say, or as you alluded to, make the country a little better for them and their kids, right? And so I teach not because, believe me, it's not for the money. I teach because it's my inspiration. So I have a very, I'm sorry to say, a very dystopic view of the next 5 to 7 years, but a fundamentally bright view of what happens when students at Nassau Community and students at Cornell and others enter the workforce, enter public service, politics. As one of my students said to me, I should have given this person a D- for this. Said, you guys, meaning, members of Congress, you guys have screwed it up as much as could be screwed up. Now, step aside and let us take it from here because we know what needs to be done. Some would have been offended by that. That I was heartened by that because I think that student is right.
I agree with you. The atmosphere in a college is a wonderful thing.
Yeah. I mean, look, it's loud, it gets raucous, the protests, I understand it.
That comes with rock and roll, we could deal with that.
That's right. That's exactly Yes.
Oh, you also wrote at one time that staying in business on Long Island is harder than staying in political office. Yeah, well, again, you're a chief cook and bottle washer. You have to do everything.
Although my team tells me I'm not competent at either of those three things, so I do their work. But yeah, it is. Look, in politics, you, again, as I said before, you gotta, if you run out of money, you just raise more money. If you're running out of public money, you just extend the debt and print more money. Yeah. That's not a sustainable model or realistic model in owning a business. The other thing, the one similarity that I learned that I love is in politics, you have to appeal to voters. Well, in running a bookstore, you have to appeal to readers. And so this is an early mistake I made, to be honest. I thought, well, I know, I love history and I love politics, so I'm just going to get all these books on history and politics and sell them. And then I realized, hello, I'm in a minority of people who love to read history and politics. Right. People they want to read romance. They want to read Colleen Hoover. They want to read spy thrillers. They want to read self-help. They want to read anything but politics and history. So I had to completely realign my inventory to reflect not what I was interested in, not my positions, but the positions and interests and curiosities of readers. Very similar to a member of Congress who has to adjust in order to meet voters where they are, rather than where the member of Congress may think they are.
Yeah, but in doing that should give them some impression of the kind of work they should be doing.
Yes,
right.
I mean, but it's a balancing act. I went through it myself. I was I would say left of center. So I was right of center on national security issues, right of center on muscular diplomacy, and right of center on deficits. I was left of center on LGBTQ plus rights, left of center on protecting the environment, left of center on civil rights and civil liberties, which meant I was right in the middle. Right. So, which meant every time I cast, and so was my district. My district was defiantly moderate, which meant every time I cast a vote, I was pissing off 50%.
Right.
If I cast a vote on the right, I was pissing off the left. If I was casting a vote on the left, I was pissing off the right. But that's what our founders envisioned, that you were going to take positions based on your own principles, but factoring in the consensus view of your constituents. And if they didn't like the way you voted, guess what? They get to fire you every 2 years. Right. It's a perfect system.
Yeah, very true. You're listening to this week's Long Island News on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. My name is Bill McIntyre, and my guest today is former Congressman Steve Israel, who decided to turn the page from a career in politics to opening an independent bookstore named Theodore's Books in Oyster Bay. I know I have a million questions to ask you, but if you don't mind sharing some of your insight, what's your opinion on the current race for president, the rematch that we're going to see?
I think I spent a lot of my time talking about this, teaching it, appear frequently on different news platforms, cable stations. I think it all comes down to 8 battleground areas in the country, 7 battleground states and 1 area in Nebraska. That's where this election is going to be decided. It's decided everywhere else. There's no way that Donald Trump is going to win New York. Forget it. There's no way that Joe Biden is going to win Oklahoma. Forget it. The election is decided by approximately 85% of the likely electorate. It rests with the 15% in those battleground areas. These are swing voters. They can vote for either Biden or Trump. They tend to make their decisions very, very late after Halloween. or after Labor Day in October. And they tend to vote based on what they're thinking at the time. So I promise you, Bill, that those independent voters, they didn't wake up this morning thinking about the Hunter Biden verdict. Okay. And they don't wake up in the morning thinking about Donald Trump's latest raving. They wake up in the morning thinking about the economy, jobs, traffic, weather. That's who will decide this election. And the polls up to now don't really reflect that reality. So I think this is going to be very tight until Election Day and maybe the days immediately following Election Day.
Right. What's your take on the current state of Congress?
It's dysfunctional, and I can explain why I think. When I was elected to Congress in 2020, there were about 125 congressional districts that were in the middle, where the voters wanted you to be bipartisan. They wanted you to cross the aisle. They valued moderation, and they rejected extremes. Today, as you and I had this conversation, the number has been reduced to about 22 congressional districts. All of the other congressional districts have been gerrymandered, meaning drawn further to the left and further to the right. And so here's the news flash for listeners to your show. Most members of Congress don't wake up in the morning fearing defeat by the other party. They wake up in the morning fearing defeat from within their own party. That somebody further to the left or further to the right of them will challenge them in a primary. Right. Explains why so many members of Congress now have, if not drifted, leapt to the fringes. They're protecting themselves from their own party. And that's why it seems so hard to get any sense of agreement in Congress on virtually anything other than how we name post offices.
What's the fix? Is there one?
Yeah, the fix is two fundamental reforms that I've been pursuing. One is to prohibit partisan gerrymandering. We shouldn't be letting state legislators and governors draw districts to protect the incumbents of their party. That's how we got into this mess. Right. We should have nonpartisan, independent redistricting processes without a political agenda. So that's one reform that I think is vitally important. And the other, and I've been outspoken on this, I did a piece that went viral when I left Congress called Confessions of a Congressman in the New York Times, where I talked about the desperate need for reform of campaign finance. Yeah. Too many members of Congress, and I don't blame them for this, I blame the system. Too many of them have to think about how they're going to raise money to survive. And we need to just take that process out of the system. They should be thinking about college tuition. They should be thinking about the economy. They should be thinking about the fact that 1 out of every 5 children in America are born hungry. Those are the issues they should think about. Now, in fairness, they do think about those issues. But if you have to spend an hour raising money, that's an hour you're not thinking about those more important issues, in my view. So I think we need public financing. I think we have to level the playing field and well, you'll never take money completely out, but minimize the influence of money in politics.
Well, if we picked a number and said we gave each candidate, I mean, I've heard recently that it cost about $1 billion to run for president.
Well, yeah, probably more when all in. But I will tell you, when in my races, on Long Island, I needed between $1.3 million and $2 million every 2 years to run. And thank God, I was a popular incumbent. I had a few stiff challenges. And that's where I had to raise $2 million. But in a typical year where I knew I was going to win, I still had to spend $1.3 million. So multiply that by 435 members of Congress. Some don't have races. They don't spend nearly that. But some have races where $8 to $10 million will be spent all in. It takes a lot of time to raise that money. And our time would be better spent figuring out how we can agree rather than how we can defeat each other.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the system seems flawed in that sense, is that I'm taking money from the people I'm supposed to, in the vein of corporations and big business, I'm taking money from people who I'm supposed to be riding herd on, who I'm supposed to be watching. And there are so many things. Where did the consumer safety standards go? You read some of the fine print in these things, and everybody's got to go to an arbitrator. You don't have a right to go to court if a product hurts you or kills you. It's the same thing we've talked about. We all have our cell phones. Did anybody read the terms and conditions when they got their cell phone? Everybody will tell you no. So then why do we let them keep writing them?
Well, I'll tell you why. Because the telecommunications lobby.
There you go.
Banks, financial services. They've got armies of lobbyists on both sides of the aisle. They've got armies of lobbyists who talk to Republicans and armies of lobbyists who talk to Democrats. Now, I will say that Democrats tend to be, in my view, at least in my experience, less influenced by the banks and telecom companies that say, we need this in order to make it harder for consumers to challenge us. I think Republicans, by voting for tax cuts for corporations and those kinds of things, have demonstrated that they have more of an affinity for those interests. But there's no question that the rights of consumers have really been whittled down considerably.
Scarily so. Now, there's also, I also want to get, I understand now that, because we're running out of time, but you're also involved in a big 3-day event happening June 28th, 29th, and the 30th called the Gold Coast Book Fair. Tell us
this is my pride and joy, Bill. I am, with the help of Bethpage Federal Credit Union and Long Island University, the Main Street Association of Oyster Bay, County of Nassau, Town of Oyster Bay. We are organizing a 3-day celebration of books and literature in Oyster Bay, June 28th, 29th, 30th. And we have marquee authors who are on the bestseller list. They're coming to Long Island, and they're going to do author talks, book talks. 80% of the events are completely free. On Friday the 28th and Saturday the 29th, everything will be at Long Island University. So you can come, you can find an author that you like, you can meet the author, have a book signed. Have to buy the book, of course, or you don't buy the book and you just meet the author. And then on Sunday, we're doing an all-day street fair in Oyster Bay. And so the town of Oyster Bay, Supervisor Saladino, has been kind enough to shut down the street in front of our store. We'll have authors, we'll have vendors, we'll have crafts, we'll have horses, we'll have children's readings. So I hope people will come and join us. This is going to be an amazing event for people who like to read.
Sounds great. Sounds terrific. And I'd love to sit down and I could talk to you for a few hours. I could, and thank you for knowing as much as you know. And the experience is very interesting. And I'm going to come to your bookstore.
Oh, good.
I don't know when, but I would like to meet you in person.
Theodore, you're welcome anytime. Theodore's Books, or you can visit our website at theodoresbooks.com.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, my guest today has been former Congressman Steve Israel, who is now the owner of an independent bookstore called Theodore's Books in Oyster Bay. And again, thank you for taking the time to be here today to speak with us. And definitely good luck with business. Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Now, the clock on the wall says it's time for this week's Long Island News to get on out of here. I'm Bill McIntyre. Remember, you can listen to us by searching for this week's Long Island News wherever you listen to podcasts. And we're right here every Friday at 3 p.m. on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC.